if it's not safe for us to tell our story and it's not safe for us to be vulnerable, we just shut off.
You should stop saying if.
When it's not safe.
Because it's not safe.
We shut off.
And it happens to everyone.
And we swallow it and we turn it off and we decide that the world can't be trusted with my story and my heart.
With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoweh's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful ends for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more.
Welcome to the Exploring More podcast with Michael Thompson, hanging out with S.J. Jennings in part 2 of parables,
stories.
Yeah.
You call this episode what you want, audience, because we're not sure what to call it.
Caleb will find a great
He'll
title.
Figure something out.
Title for it. But stories that matter. And so, part 2, we, without rehashing a bunch of that, the significance of story and how we are in a story, how we are playing different parts in different stories. I'm a husband, I'm a father, and a friend. Robin in my story is the same. We've said this for years though, but if the story's revolving around you, you're probably living in too small of a story. So to have those different parts that you're playing and to know even what part that is as characters in a story evolve. Yeah. They journey together.
But they're not the whole story.
Right. They're even a part of something
larger,
much larger. And when stories collide, it can be wonderful and glorious. And then other times those collisions can be absolutely traumatic and awful. I was thinking about the Nashville shooting at the school. I mean, there's a storyline that was obviously in the making long before that day.
Right.
And that's the saddest part is without going into detail, but that story, that person's story collided with everybody in that school. And I think 6. Yeah.
3 kids, 3 adults.
3 adults were fatally, injured and killed in that space. And so, these have, why are there villains in every story that seems to be weighty and seems to matter? Why is there seems to be a curse or some effect, magically on a land or on a person? They're reminding us that, there's a curse on this world. There's a fallenness in which we live, and there are people that can be affected in a bad way and affected in a great way, and there's good and evil.
Going all the way back to the beginning. I mean, to the first ones that fell.
Yeah. So we do keep kind of repeating the story, and so many of its ingredients in many, many, many different ways. But I was thinking about, and that's what we're going to do, because we are storytellers.
Yeah.
We are. I think we just don't even see, what'd you do today? Is tell me the story of your day, today.
Right.
How was the weekend? tell me the stories of what happened this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
You grew up in Seattle? Mm-hmm. I lived in Seattle. Where did you live? Tell me the stories.
Right.
So we're all storytellers.
Right.
And we're all in this space.
What brought you to North Carolina?
Yeah.
How did Zoweh start? I mean, it's endless, right?
Yeah, Night of Stories, right?
Sure.
And it was one of those evenings that we were sharing a lot of that stuff, not, last year. And people, the reaction was, I love that.
Mm-hmm. I had no idea.
That's the line. I had no idea. I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
That was amazing, and they came to see or understand. So, this, and I do think that it's part of the magic behind Instagram and YouTube and these reels and these shorts. Yeah,
there's even one. It's Instagram or Facebook calls it stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
It
might be both.
Yeah, and so
Caleb, is it both? Yeah. Okay.
and if I had access to your algorithms, if I had access to your computer or your phone, and could look in there, I could see. Well, these are the stories that, for whatever reason, these are the stories that this person is inclined, right, to watch or to see. So I got stuck the other day. I got talking about stories, but I am fascinated by America's Got Talent, Britain's Got Talent, all these auditioning type shows.
Just amazing.
American Idol, The Voice, and I remember this in the Olympics as well. The same stuff. When they profile a certain character who's auditioning. Mm-hmm. And you get to know where they came from and why they're here. And, oh my gosh, it just makes my relationship with that character more deep, rich. I didn't know that story. Mm-hmm. I didn't know his dad died. Mm-hmm. Or her mom is struggling with cancer and she's here.
Right.
My gosh.
So that's the commonality amongst the stories that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's just the commonality, period, amongst us, is there stories of what we've overcome.
Yeah. Oh,
to get where we stories? Are, right?
Yeah.
I overcame this to get to this point. I remember one I watched one time. There was a woman, I think it was America's Got Talent. She learned to play guitar and to sing at a young age and then went deaf. And so she had the muscle memory to still be able to
get out,
sing and play guitar.
It's extraordinary.
Look it up.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, look it up on YouTube. She can still, but she's deaf. And it's really, so there's just extraordinary stories like that. The guy, Paul Potts, I think is his name. Our friend Gary shows his clip every time he does a glory talk. The guy was a cell phone salesman, and
in Yorkshire or whatever it was.
Wherever it was, yeah. And just an average looking dude. But man, when he started to sing,
it was opera. I think he,
yes.
It wasn't.
Nessun Dorma is.
It wasn't right. It wasn't right. Like, and
that's coming out of that guy.
And to see all the audience go,
right.
I think Simon Cowell says, I did not expect that.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's this idea about stories. Everybody is one. And I think about the quote about be kind to everyone because everybody's going through something.
Sure.
Or they're either going in or they're in it or they're coming out of something.
Yep.
So the opportunity to, I think, bring this subject that we're talking about, into the light as something that literally will give you light in order to see your story, others' stories.
Yeah.
The gospel, God's story, history, his story, and that not just the interaction, SJ, it's the tangling up of.
Mm-hmm.
It's the tangling up of,
Yeah.
and to be invited to, we call it an observation deck, at Zoweh, that you're in a scene, you can get hit, you can do the hitting, you're in a scene, and then you can like the tool in the woodshed, then you can observe that scene. What just happened? What was I feeling? I was with a counselor not too long ago, and this guy was reading my face and my body as I was telling stories, and he must have asked me in the course of our time 3 times, what just happened? What are you feeling? And I could describe either in my body or, what I was feeling and where in my gut, or, your shoulder, Michael, your shoulders are, and your face.
You're not breathing.
Right.
Whatever it is.
I mean, to be that observant,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that's what I was paying him to do.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be really observant? And
but not everybody has learned how to do that, and that's what we're trying to learn it and trying to teach.
Not
it
even
at the same
paid
time.
professionals. I'm amazed at
absolutely
the
true.
plethora of candidates my family and I have seen and been to.
Yeah,
I think of
what about Bob?
Patch Adams.
Oh.
No, Patch Adams. Where he's like,
either
when he goes into that story, when he goes into his psychiatrist's office, he's literally in the psychiatric ward.
Mm-hmm.
He's checked himself in because he's suicidal, right? And he makes connections with some of the other patients, and it's in that connection with humanity that Patch Adams identifies what he wants. Back to desire, we talked about that. I mean, these are the ingredients in all these stories.
Mm-hmm.
He connects with his desire. He helps Rudy, overcome the squirrels
Mm-hmm.
and the visions that he's having and what he's getting. So he goes to the psychiatrist, his attending psychiatrist, who is pretty. It's pharisaical is the best way I could describe it. Academic,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, "I'm ready to leave." And his psychiatrist says, "Well, I don't think you're ready to leave." He said, "Well, you're not the boss of me. I checked myself in." Paraphrase.
Yeah.
I'm checking out, and he says, "Well, why would you do that? And what are you going to do?" He said, "Well, I want to help people." Patch Adams says, "Well, I want to help people. I want to listen to people. I connected with Rudy last night. I want more of that. I really want to connect with people and help them with their problems."
Right.
And the psychiatrist says, "Well, that's what I do." And Patch Adams says, "Yeah, but you suck at it."
Suck at it.
But you suck at it.
So true.
So I think about, the people that we actually give not our attention to, but we give our problems to, we give our stories to, as you said, and as Patch Adams found out, there's not a lot of great people in which you can entrust your story. It's a very unfortunate reality. And I think the story work that we are inviting people to do in this, it's not just notice that you identify with Rocky or Luke Skywalker or whoever. It's kind of the deeper dive with Jesus as to what is this about? What is this inviting me to see? And where is this inviting us to go?
Yeah.
And getting in that on that observation deck in a space where, now you're not experiencing the light in the tool shed. You're trying to understand it.
I think really, Michael, what occurs to me is I think our story is the long, tragic story of trying to tell our story. and not being heard and not being listened to and not being cared for. And so what most of us do then, if it's not safe for us to tell our story, and it's not safe for us to be vulnerable, we just
stop,
shut off.
You should stop saying if.
When it's not safe.
Because it's not safe.
We shut off.
And it happens to
everyone. And we swallow it and we turn it off and we decide that the world can't be trusted with my story and my heart. Amen. And so all these stories of all these people walking around, and what happens is, right, when you can't be vulnerable and be open and share your hurts and your hopes, that all turns into some kind of toxic resentment inside you. And so that you end up like the guy that sucks at it, because that guy has a story too, right?
Yeah. And you don't get enough of it, but it's unfortunately, it's just his job.
Right.
And he's become so accustomed to not listening and being bored with and
filling out paperwork,
whatever the monotony has done to him.
So at some point, maybe in this guy's story, now I'm making up a story, but maybe in this character's story, he was like a hopeful like Patches.
Yeah.
And then it just, the world,
the institution
beats him down to the point.
Because that's the Patch Adams story. It's what the medical institution is saying he has to be, the way he has to do it. And that's why that's such a great story.
Right.
And among other things that are extremely, even the other way Patch Adams is doing it doesn't keep them safe. There's great loss in the Patch Adams story, as there's great loss in everyone's story. And I forced you to say if,
or stop saying if,
and say when, and because. And this goes back to parenthood. I mean, bless our moms and dads, bless us as moms and dads. This story and the ways in which we were missed by, you said, other people. And if I'm honest, we dive into, let's start with the people.
Sure.
Who your story was entrusted to in formative years.
And whom you get your first impression of who God is.
All of that, it's kind of a setup for the comeback. And, we just had 30 some men in here this last weekend, and to the man, every man is father wounded and mother wounded. It's part of the story and storyline. And we get so used to not being listened to, we either inherit kind of how we were trained, and so we aren't great listeners to story, not just storytellers, but story listeners. That's the crazy thing, is the very thing that you wish people would have done for you, you in turn suck at it.
Yeah, that's right.
And because you're so, I've been that guy who's so starving to have somebody listen to my story that I really can't listen to somebody else's. I find myself.
That's that resentment I'm talking about, right?
We're wrestling over the food.
Yeah.
We're wrestling over the sustenance, and we do the Brian Regan bit, right? Like, well, that ain't nothing. Let me tell you what happened to me. And all of a sudden, somebody's who's hurting, and I've been this and I've done this, and I don't want to be this and do this anymore. But it's that someone who's hurting is now wanting to share, taking the courage to share their story, and the person that has the opportunity to be entrusted with it just flips the whole story and says, that ain't nothing.
Yep.
And now in my state, I have to try to care for you.
While internally feeling the disappointment
of not being seen, not being heard,
again,
and not understanding
again, and which again, this disappointment and this being let down again, you can't tell me it has to lead to resentment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is the fruit of those things.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to live in a resentful way. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying without the tools and the awareness and the understanding of what's really going on, that is what those things produce.
Let me say a word about resentment because you brought it up.
Mm-hmm.
You know what the lightest and yet powerful form of resentment is? I just won't tell you again. It's the resignation that you're not safe, and I'm not going to do that again.
And you may never know that I'm never going to do it again.
That's right.
But
so
I
the
know.
resentment, you know, we think of resentment. SJ, what I was trying to do that for. The reason I was doing that is we think of resentment as this kind of incredibly weighty. You know, you got to there. Well, resentment is present when I'm just not going to trust you anymore. I'm not going to share with you anymore. I don't want to feel that. That's the negative one. You're moving in the direction of resentment when I'm. Now we can go bowl. we can go work out. We can go fish, but I'm not going there.
Right.
Because of I don't need
I wonder how many marriages died the death of 1,000
paper cuts
called resentment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You miss me again. Oh, it's painful.
Yeah.
Painful to live with.
And how can you not bring that into a marriage relationship? Because that's what happened to you as an individual.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow. So we're taking story and
let's pause for a station break
and diving into the effects and the realities of how we interpret our stories and that's that I think what we just modeled in some way is what we're inviting people to consider, you know, what happened to you
and the importance
and what's
of it.
the effect of it and rightly interpreting it and weighing it properly and understanding it well, man, that's none of that's even available if you don't put it in park, find the observation deck.
Yeah.
And maybe even, and I think this is true, not maybe, and at some point get some help.
Mm-hmm.
Find somebody who, whether you pay them or they're just good at it, find somebody who can help you navigate this story, because every character in all those stories, number one, there's more to their story than they realize, and then secondly, there's parts of it that's not even available to them to interpret. They need, you know, the guide, because Frodo wishes Gollum that Frodo wishes that Gollum had been killed, and Gandalf's there to, you know, Bilbo should have killed Gollum. Don't be so quick to deal in death, Frodo.
Yes, Smeagol he was once called, before the ring found him, before it drove him mad.
It's a pity Bilbo didn't kill him when he had the chance.
Pity? It was pity that stayed Bilbo's hand. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them, Frodo? Do not be too eager to deal out death and judgment. Even the very wise cannot see all ends. My heart tells me that Gollum has some part to play yet, for good or ill, before this is over.
Gollum may still have an important part to play in this story.
Yeah.
And you can see it in Frodo's face, in the actor's face, like, what are you talking about? That is such a shift.
He's with Sam and has to find a way to get to Mordor.
Right.
And Sam is like the one that wants to just kill Gollum, you know? So it's really interesting.
So the scenes continue. So we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk to you about some of the stories that have impacted your heart, and we can wrap up this. I don't know if we can wrap it up. We'll see. We'll be right back on the Exploring More podcast.
Every man has a kingdom. Not every king rules well. Like a living piece in life's checker game, you are moving across the board towards your time of greatest authority and impact. But what kind of king will you be? In King Me, I want to guide you through the 6 stages of the masculine journey and invite you to walk with God into healing encounters and validating experiences. Through this, we can learn to wield love as our greatest weapon and provide a kingdom where hearts are free. Every man does have a kingdom. Not every king rules well. You can. It's your move.
Now available on Amazon. See kingmebook.com for more details.
Welcome back to the Exploring More podcast, part 2, in the parables, the stories, the weight of story, the significance of story, and how all the stories that we love are inviting us to see something and be
seen
and be something. Yeah, be seen. And so, this is technically part 4, since it's the 4th segment that we've talked about this. I mean, this may be need this. I think this will be an ongoing series.
This is the second half of the second.
Yeah, I'm going to propose that we have.
Let's just stop with the numbers and just talk about stuff that we're done talking about.
I think we have a series that comes in from time to time, because what I'd love to do, and we won't have time this session, is I would love to actually, like we have with Patch Adams, like we have with Lord of the Rings. I think there's some very specific stories that we should unpack. On the other side of this, and maybe
movie clips. You mean
maybe release one here and there, but just the parable. Let's get back to the parable series, and we want to address a specific parable. So I'm saying that on camera so that we can do that.
Yeah, hold us to it.
Yeah,
listeners,
and we can do it.
Watchers. Yeah, because here's what I'm thinking, man. I would love to do so when we find or something finds us or we find it, right? Bring in the clip, and then we have like a reaction to that clip and talk.
That's right.
I'm immediately thinking about and I'm immediately thinking about because you utilized one of the clips, or you were going to, from the Adam Project.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you did play it at the deepening weekend.
I did. I did.
But there's a scene in there where he's sitting at a picnic table with his younger self, and I remember watching that, and I couldn't wait to talk to you and the guys about it because it was so impactful. So. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Like, so, let's keep notes, like, as we are watching different movies or hearing different things.
This could become the parable podcast. We could do a show, or a series of shows on the effect, the impact of, did it really happen? No, but it's true.
Yeah. And the story within the story.
Oh yeah. Mandalorian. Watching.
Oh, I've been listening to them here. Secret Life of Walter Mitty. We talked about that the other day.
Such a great story.
Such a great story. Matrix, The Adam Project, Amazing Grace, The Chosen.
Yeah.
Is so amazing. So and there's a reason they call it the greatest story. This is just a couple days is Good Friday. We're recording on the Wednesday before Good Friday.
Yeah.
I mean, the greatest story ever told is the gospel. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
and yet when you say gospel, we kind of go, oh yeah,
right. Yeah.
But you say Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or or Gladiator, you're like, oh man, what about the scene?
Star Wars. Yeah. I mean,
and so
people get excited.
So
about it,
what?
As do we?
You have a short list there, but in your story, SJ, what in the last decade, what's been a moment when a story God has worked in and through a story and invited you to see something, or, I think of God's disruptive, provoking ways. How has He disrupted your story with the invitation of some other story?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. So I became a Christian in 2005 after, and I've told the story before, after really, really losing my way, coming really close to the edge of taking my own life. And so when we moved to North Carolina in 2006, we found a church, and God really led me to pretty transparently tell the story of what we had been through and all of that. So that led me to being a small group leader. That led me to a layperson's role in the church, volunteer, and then I got invited to this weekend, I think in 2009, might have been 10, called Top Gun.
Yeah. Our earliest, weekends.
Some of the earlier ones. Yeah. So I go, simply because I trusted the guy that invited me.
Right.
And I heard a bunch of truth that I didn't really understand, but it was thoroughly intriguing to me. And I even went back to...
Intriguing is a good word. I
went back to the church and to my friends there, the other men that I was in some small groups with, and said, man, I need to go back and hear it again. Why don't you come with me?
Right.
So I started kind of getting into this role of bringing guys to the weekend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then in 2013, it was actually 10 years ago yesterday, I'm at a weekend.
You do that all the time. I don't know how you do that. That's amazing. I couldn't remember. What did I think was 2004?
It's Facebook memories.
Well, Amazing Grace. I was like, is it 2004 or 2011? That's a pretty big
That's a gap.
But you have a unique way of putting. It was 11 years ago next Thursday. You say crap like that all the time.
I do. It's
true. How does he know that?
It's true. Mostly it's Facebook memories because I posted about the Top Gun weekend.
Okay.
And it popped up in my memories, right? So I knew it was these dates. But 10 years ago yesterday, I had kind of gotten into this role of the weekend being about bringing men.
Yeah.
And not really for my heart, but just for them.
You're doing a guide service.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Awesome. It's a way to do it, So I do that for about 4 years, and we're at this weekend. And our friend Tom Benner was doing a session on soaking prayer. And I had never heard of that before. So I'm like, I want to go to that, And so and we've talked about it before on the podcast. If you're not sure what that is, just look up a previous episode
on prayer.
I don't want to get into it now.
I think it's ways to pray or how we pray or something. Like that.
It's just an opportunity to kind of slow down, shut down, outside influences and distractions, and just focus a little bit. So during this soaking prayer time, I am just kind of sitting there, listening to the music, feeling calm and, I would say, meditative. I'm in this kind of state of just listening and kind of had drowned out everything else. And I just hear this name Abigail in my head. And I thought, well, that's weird. And I just kind of let it go, and it circles back around and comes back to me again. Well, about the fourth time, I'm kind of like, okay, God, what is this about? So
time out. So I want to just say that's the beauty of believing that not every thought is your own.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like just a time out for God speaking and saying that not every thought is your own.
Yeah.
Temptation, it's not always you.
Yeah.
And neither is provoking and disruption and Abigail, why does this keep coming up?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think I said earlier on this very episode, Aragorn, and I'm thinking, because I'm so familiar with Lord of the Rings and Aragorn that I'm doing this
Must
wrong.
be me.
It's probably I'm not doing this.
I'm
right.
either.
So anyway,
I want that to be about me. That's who I want to be. It couldn't. No. So I would say that. If nothing else, and there are other things, but if nothing else, the training I had received from going for those previous 4 years enabled me to say, okay, wait a minute, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's not going away, keeps coming up. Yeah.
Yeah. So the soaking prayer sessions ends, and I see a guy who had connected with me at registration, and I had seen him a few other times. at other events. His name is Blake, and he was in a medic role that weekend, I believe.
Yeah.
And I said, "Hey, Blake, can I just talk to you about this for a few minutes?" And so we sit down. We find a spot down in the lobby at the Spring Center at Camp Rockbridge. And he and I just talk for a while, and I tell him some of my story. And I start crying, just uncontrollably crying. And Blake, God bless him, he's just kind
Back
of
to that listening,
hanging on, watching, waiting, being comforting. So what, after telling him my story and some of the things I had done, just me having the opportunity to share my story and not have him make it about him, I'm talking about Blake now, or interrupt me with other than to say, things like, when was this? Or how long ago was that? Stuff like that, that's clarifying. I told him the story of in 2004, before I was saved, I was in an affair with a woman, and we got pregnant, and I took her to the clinic to have an abortion. And I remember the parking lot. I remember sitting out there in the car and all of that, how horrible that was. And what happened to me with Blake, what God did in that moment was he told me my daughter's name. Abigail Grace is her name. Which, by the way, Abigail in Hebrew means the father's joy.
I have an Abigail.
Yes, you do. So,
yep.
I tell him that I think that's what's happening, and Blake says, I think you're right. So take your journal, go find a quiet spot, spend some more time with him, ask him some questions, see what he tells you.
Right.
So I do that. I walked out it was a beautiful day in April. And I found a little spot, and I'm looking out. If you've been to Rockbridge, any of the listeners have been to Rockbridge, as you're walking from the meeting hall, the Spring Center, up to the dining hall, you kind of walk up a sidewalk, up a hill. And if you stop about halfway up the hill and turn back, it's just this beautiful vista of the valley. You can see the mountains in the distance, and the lake, is down
right
below.
over the lake, right?
All
right
of that.
Through the lake.
It's just gorgeous, And again, it was a beautiful spring day. So I turn back as I'm walking up the hill, and I'm taking that in, and what appears in front of me is the bars of a jail cell.
Wow.
And I say, God, what is that? And as I ask him that question, the door swings open, and it's like everything became, it was almost like in The Wizard of Oz. Everything had been kind of black and white, and now, okay, this door's open. Now things are in color. What I had done, Michael, was I had imprisoned myself through guilt and shame over what I had done to Abigail. And I had been living in this prison. Even though I had come to know Jesus 8 years before, I was still living in this place of imprisonment.
Or at least a part of you was, for sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So this gate swings open, and I could step into freedom. And what he showed me was that I had painted the inside of my jail cell to look like
decorated
freedom, right? Because I just didn't there was too much guilt and shame associated with that for me to even talk to God about it.
Yeah.
So I just pretended like I was free from it and like it didn't exist somehow.
Yeah.
So the door swings open, and I walk out into more freedom.
Yeah.
And so the really cool part about that is that since that happened, God showed me Abigail again. So that was 2013. 8 years later, or 8 years later in 2021, I'm in Colorado, and again in a soaking time of prayer, and this image of a teenage girl in a white dress, barefoot, twirling around on a grassy hill. That's where God brings me. And so, and I knew immediately who it was.
You knew this time, right?
So, yeah, that's probably, probably the greatest story of my life.
Restory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Story being, continuing, and as it continues, being restoried, remade, reclaimed,
Continue.
redeemed, and that's the kingdom way, right? That's the kingdom way. We just, we know that that's available. We know that that's true. And yet, I wonder how many of us know it regularly, that this is the work of Jesus. This is the work of the Father. This is the work of the Holy Spirit.
Well, let me say one other thing before you.
I was going to say,
ahead.
being invited, forced is a better word when you're at the conference. Being forced into those spaces,
Right.
Or invited into those spaces of, encountering, experiencing, that's just so, it's just critical. It is critical to, reflection and observation and yes, some analysis and the questions.
But the quiet.
Yes.
I would say, I'm a couple of things. I'm becoming more and more open-hearted, but my heart being open to the possibility that God was up to something in that moment. Was my, as far as I can recall. One of the first times that I was intentionally opening my heart and being vulnerable with God, right? Because in 2016, he brings this word vulnerability. And that's a continuation of this same story.
If the title of that session would have been Overcoming Abortion Shame, who would have gone? I mean,
nobody.
Maybe a couple very brave souls.
Or desperate souls.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And yet at a men's conference nonetheless.
Right.
But it was soaking. So, really, I think about the sneakiness of God.
Oh, yeah.
And there were other men deeply impacted by that time, but the session wasn't titled whatever they were deeply impacted by.
Yes.
It was come be with God and let, and I know what that time is set to just, try to put everybody in that third gear, slow down. Let's experience quiet, solitude together, and see what God may want to say. And sometimes it's music with words. Sometimes it's music that's soundtracks. Goodness sakes, here we are back to story.
Right.
I love the soundtrack. These current modern day symphonies and the way you could play a few bars of some soundtrack and we know the movie.
Yep.
That's Jason Bourne.
Yep.
Right. That's James Bond.
Mm-hmm. That's
right?
Back to the Future. That's
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings.
That's all of the different things that
there's
shape.
An epic nature to them.
And there's an epic nature to us.
Mm-hmm.
That's I'm so glad you said epic.
Mm-hmm.
Epic nature. And so it goes back to will you kind of move further from where your feet seem to be touching the bottom? Will you move into the deeper water where you're really not sure what's down there under your feet?
Right. Yeah.
Where the temperature feels a little colder, where the undercurrents, something may bonk into you,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully not bite, but oh my gosh, I just think of the story is the language of the heart. And if you want to have a settled heart or get more of your heart back or reclaim pieces of you that have been marred or stolen or in some way, by the enemy destroyed. And every one of us have those parts.
Yeah. I think about forced into the shadows,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
parts of us being forced.
Yeah. And so where one man may get one of his names or new names, abolitionist, another man gets a name that acceptance, it's okay, I have her, you'll see her, not yet. I mean, that's another story
Mm-hmm.
altogether.
Yeah.
And yet I think walking with the author and letting him, if you want to call it edit or editing, right, our story, showing us more, showing us less, this wasn't your fault. I mean, whatever we give to him, he can be trusted with. Mm-hmm. And that's probably one of the most sinister things the enemy did in my story was for a while have me convinced that God loved me, but he really wasn't that safe for me.
Yeah. Loved you, but wasn't in love with you.
And
yeah.
And if you're going to get some time away with God, it's probably going to hurt in a way that is punitive. So there was just all kinds of things that needed reclassing and reforging and redeeming and all of that in our story. So, as we land this, I think that's our encouragement is, your story matters. You matter.
Yeah.
You are a significant part of a larger story. And oh my gosh, what would it be like to meet with the author, to meet with the guide in order to learn how to play your part and find along the way that your part's not that different than his part. Mm-hmm. As an image bearer, he wants to entrust you parts of this story that when you're ready, he will.
Yeah.
And what's that look like to become ready? I mean, not a plug for King Me, but that was why I had to write it, was because that's what was happening to me.
Sure.
And that's what I got to discover about the reclaiming of parts of me in my masculine journey so that I could be entrusted with eventually the hearts of others.
Yeah.
And
yeah. I chuckled a little bit because I was talking with a guy yesterday who was very thankful that I was listening to him and talking with him. And the image came to my mind of, the two of us walking on a path, and I got whacked in the face with a branch. So now I know enough to say, hey man, watch out for this branch. That's about as far ahead of him on the path I am.
Yeah. One day we'll cut this branch off.
Somebody will.
But,
yeah.
Oh yeah, that's good. So, so listeners, thank you for, entering into our story, letting us enter into your story through this podcast. And it is our hope that, that you will explore more in the area of story, yours, God's, and then because there is where you can become really good for someone else's story.
Right. Yeah.
Till
because
next
it
time.
happened to you.
Yep.
Right.
Till next time. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you so much for listening, watching. Send us an email at exploringmore@zoweh.org. If you've got questions or comments, you can leave a comment below here on YouTube as well. And give us a like, a share, subscribe. That's how we get found and how others can hear this message too.
One more thing comes to mind as you do the credit scrolls.
Right.
I look forward to meeting Abigail someday. That's a great story. Thanks for sharing it.
That's really kind. Thank you.
Courageous thing to share, and hard thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I look forward to that.
Thanks, man.
When this story transitions to the one that never ends. So, yeah.
Amen to that.
Amen.
Thanks for watching.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoweh.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoweh on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoweh on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.